Meeting Sherlock Holmes, Lord Hastings Case by Ngamoko Nikora. Chapter 1. A Whiff of Mystery. Tom, Mark and Tipo had only just returned from their remarkable adventure with Cleopatra in ancient Egypt when they felt the familiar pull of the oak tree once more. Rumours of an exciting new journey danced in their minds, and their hearts raced with curiosity about where they might end up next. "Do you think we'll go somewhere even cooler this time?" Mark asked, his eyes bright with anticipation. "Cooler than ancient Egypt? That'll be hard." Tipo laughed, adjusting his backpack. "But I'm ready for anything." "Let's see what the tree has in store for us," Tom said, stepping forward. The leaves of the ancient oak seemed to rustle in response, as if inviting them in. As they leaned into the hollow, a vibrant swirl of colours engulfed them. The world spun around, and before they knew it, they were standing in the middle of a foggy street in 19th century London. "Wow, this is incredible," Tipo exclaimed, looking around at the gaslit street lamps and horse-drawn carriages that passed by. "Where are we?" "I think we're in London," Tom said, scanning the surroundings. "But when? I can't tell." "Look at those people." Mark pointed down the street, where a group was gathered, whispering in hushed tones. "Maybe they know." Chapter 2. A Cracked Case. The trio approached the gathered crowd. Curiosity piqued. They overheard snippets of conversation about a murder that had taken place nearby. The aura was tense with speculation and fear. "Did you hear? Lord Hastings has been found dead," a woman exclaimed, her eyes wide with shock. "Who would do such a thing?" a man replied. "It can't be coincidence. The detective is to solve the case." "Detective? What detective?" Tom asked, nudging his friends. "Sherlock Holmes," the woman answered, her voice trembling with excitement. Tom, Mark and Tipo exchanged glances. They had heard of the legendary detective, known for his brilliant mind and sharp wit. This was their chance. "Let's find him," Tom urged. "We might be able to help." After asking a few locals for directions, the boys made their way to Baker Street, and soon they found themselves standing in front of number 221B, the famous residence of Sherlock Holmes. Chapter 3. An Invitation to Solve. As they knocked hesitantly on the door, a few moments later it swung open, revealing an elderly woman with a stern expression. "Mrs. Hudson?" Mark asked. "Indeed," she replied, studying the boys with a discerning eye. "What brings you here?" "We are looking for Sherlock Holmes," Tipo said. "We want to help him with the murder case." Mrs. Hudson sighed, but amusement flickered in her eyes. "I'm not sure he needs help from three boys, but come in." Inside the room was filled with books, maps, and various detective gadgets, all adding to the aura of chaotic genius. At the centre of it all sat Sherlock Holmes, tall with piercing eyes that seemed to take in every detail. "What do we have here?" he asked, noticing the boys. "3 young adventurers looking for excitement, I presume." Tom stepped forward. "We heard about the murder of Lord Hastings. We want to help solve the mystery." Holmes raised an eyebrow, intrigue sparkling in his eyes. "Very well. If you wish to assist, your energy might prove useful. But you must be prepared. This is no light task." Chapter 4. The investigation begins. With that, Holmes gathered his magnifying glass and notepad. First, we must assess the crime scene. Lord Hastings was found dead in his study at the Hastings Manor. Let us proceed. The boys followed eagerly as they boarded a carriage bound for the manor. Along the way, Holmes explained his deductive methods. "You see, boys, observation is key in solving any mystery. The smallest detail can unveil the greatest truth," he said, eyes glinting. "Like what?" Tipo asked, fascinated. "Like the position of an object, the scent in the air, or even a person's mannerisms." Holmes smiled faintly. "It is in the connections we make that the puzzle pieces fall into place." As they arrived at the manor, the atmosphere was sombre. The staff guided them to the study where Lord Hastings had met his fate. Chapter 5. The scene of the crime. Inside the study, the boys surveyed the room. Large bookshelves lined the walls, and a grand desk stood at the centre. Holmes moved about, scrutinizing everything thoroughly. "Notice the overturned chair. A struggle, perhaps," he said, pointing to the desk, where papers had scattered across the floor. "Yet the window remains closed. Did he have an altercation with someone inside?" Tom observed the desk closely. "There's a broken glass here. It must have fallen during the struggle." "Insightful," Holmes remarked. "And what about the papers? They seem hastily arranged." "Could they reveal something important?" Mark added, moving closer. "Indeed," Holmes said, carefully lifting one of the sheets. "It appears to be a ledger, and there's a name I did not expect to see here." Chapter 6. Secrets and Suspects. Intrigued, the boys leaned in as Holmes continued. "It seems Lord Hastings had dealings with several individuals, some quite dubious." He scanned the names on the ledger. "His business affairs are tangled in a web of deceit." Mrs. Hudson entered abruptly, bringing tea. "I overheard the staff discussing a dinner party the night before last. Perhaps one of the guests was not what they appeared to be." "Excellent deduction, Mrs. Hudson," Holmes said. "Boys, we must speak with the guests. Who among them had a motive?" "Maybe they were jealous of him," Tipo suggested, "or had a dispute." "Precisely. The list of invitees would be a good starting point," Holmes said. "Let us return to Baker Street to see what we can uncover." Chapter 7. the dinner guests. Back in their headquarters, they sifted through information about the guests. Each had unique backgrounds, and several had motives overflowing with suspicion. "Here's the original guest list," Mark said, excitedly pointing to a note. "There's Lord Ashbourne. He's known for his reckless investments. And Lady Elise, who was a rival to Lord Hastings in business." Holmes studied the list thoughtfully. "We must arrange to speak to them. But first, boys, I want you to write down what you observe about each one." The three friends spent the next half hour researching the guests, taking mental notes of their behaviours and backgrounds while Holmes prepared for their interrogations. Chapter 8. The First Suspect. That evening, Holmes arranged a meeting with Lord Ashbourne at a grand restaurant. The boys witnessed a man with sharp features and an air of arrogance. "Thank you for meeting us, Lord Ashbourne," Holmes began. "We have some questions regarding your partnership with Lord Hastings." Lord Ashbourne sneered. "Hastings was a fool. He squandered his opportunities. I had no part in his death." "Is it true you had a disagreement at the party?" Tom asked boldly. "Disagreement? Nothing more than business talks, boy," Ashbourne snapped. He eyed the group warily. "You do best to stay out of matters that do not concern you." Tom exchanged glances with Tipo and Mark, their expressions questioning. As they left the restaurant, Tipo murmured, "He seemed too defensive. What if he's hiding something?" "You might be right," Holmes replied slowly, his eyes gleaming with thought. "We must remain vigilant." Chapter 9. The Lady's Secret. The next day, Holmes arranged to speak with Lady Elise at her estate. The boys were eager to meet her, sensing there was more to her than met the eye. Lady Elise greeted them with a gracious smile, but a subtle tension. "What brings you here? My husband is still mourning." "We wish to know more about your relationship with Lord Hastings," Holmes said, noting her tight grip on her teacup. "We were business rivals, nothing more," she replied, her eyes dancing. "I only hope my dear friend finds justice." "But you were seen arguing with him the night of his demise," Mark chimed in, certainty in his voice. Elise flushed. "It was a trivial matter among gentlemen. Please do not imply anything sinister." Holmes observed her closely. "The truth often lies deeper than the surface, dear lady." As they left, Tom remarked, "She could be hiding her true feelings about the business dealings." "Very perceptive, Tom," Holmes complimented. "An essential skill for a detective." Chapter 10. Cracks in the Case. With each interview, the pieces of the puzzle began to shift. Discussions led them to realize that everyone had a motive: jealousy, greed, rivalry, a tangled web of deceit. After their investigations, the boys retreated to Baker Street to regroup. Their atmosphere was thick with tension as they laid out their findings. "Let's not forget about the Master of Ceremonies at the dinner party, Mr. Green," Mark suggested. "I heard he wasn't as friendly with Hastings either." Holmes nodded. "He could be significant. Let's arrange to meet him." Chapter 11. The final confrontation. After meeting with Mr. Green, the tension thickened as they piled more evidence against the guests, along with an alarming discovery. Money might have been a motive after all. Someone among them had a lot to gain from the death of Hastings, and it's time we pull the evidence together to confront them, Tom said while organising papers on the table. Holmes considered this. You are right. Join me at Lady Elisa's house tomorrow. I believe the culprit will try to make their escape, and we shall catch them in the act. But how do we catch them? Tipo asked, a hint of worry in his voice. We will lay a trap and observe all present for any signs of deceit. Chapter 12. The Revelation. The following evening, under candlelight in Lady Elisa's estate, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation as guests mingled at a party. Tom, Mark, and Tipo remained on guard. Holmes carefully navigated the room, leaning towards each guest, keen to observe their reactions, while Tom and Tipo kept a lookout near the exit. Hours rolled by until Holmes lifted his glass. Ladies and gentlemen, if I may have your attention, he called out, his voice slicing through the chatter. I have gathered you here to discuss the unfortunate demise of Lord Hastings. A hush fell as eyes turned to Holmes, anxiously awaiting what he would say next. Tonight, I aim to unveil the true murderer amongst you. He continued, his gaze sweeping across the room, stopping momentarily on each suspect. You, Lord Ashburn shouted, pointing at Lady Elise. You wished him dead over your failed business. Do not twist the narrative, Lady Elise retorted, indignant. You're the one who conspired. As tension erupted, Holmes interjected. Enough! This conflict obscures the truth. I have gathered evidence that points toward someone quite unexpected. Allow me to introduce Mr. Green. The room erupted in gasps as all eyes locked on him. He shifted uncomfortably. You, Mr. Green, could not bear the thought of losing your patronage. Lord Hastings was about to cancel your contract over your shoddy work. You killed him to preserve your livelihood. Chapter 13. The Arrest. Mr. Green's demeanour shifted from nervous to hostile. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to scare him. It was an accident, he cried, trying to back away. While the attendees gasped, Holmes signalled for the authorities to apprehend Mr. Green. As he was led away, whispers of disbelief rippled through the crowd. Exceptional deduction, Holmes, Tom remarked, beaming with pride. Indeed, Mark added, we did it. Holmes raised an eyebrow in amusement. This time it was the collaboration that proved successful, boys. You assisted in a tremendous way by keeping your minds open. Chapter 14. A Grateful Farewell. The boys and Holmes gathered a few days later to discuss the case. The resolve with which they had tackled the mystery had forged a bond between them. Thank you for allowing us to assist you, Mr. Holmes, Tipo said, beaming. It was a pleasure to have such eager minds, Holmes replied, I expect great things from each of you. Never stop seeking the truth." As the time approached for them to leave, the boys bid their farewells, feeling a mix of sadness and fulfillment. They would return home carrying the memories of a thrilling adventure. "How do we get back?" Mark asked, glancing around. Holmes chuckled. "Just think of your oak tree. It will be awaiting you." The boys gathered their thoughts, picturing the tree, the familiar bark, and the adventure that had led them here. Chapter 15. Homeward Bound. A shimmering light enveloped the boys as they focused on that special oak tree. With a swirl of colours and a rush of wind, the world around them dissolved. They landed back under the great oak, hearts racing and excitement bubbling. "What an adventure!" Tom exclaimed. "I feel like a real detective," Tipo added, a beaming smile on his face. "And we finally met Sherlock Holmes," Mark laughed. As they recounted their fate, they knew this journey had changed them. They weren't just friends anymore, they were part of something larger, a quest for knowledge and truth in a world full of mysteries. With a promise to return for another adventure, they headed home, spirits high and imaginations ready for their next journey. Meeting Sherlock Holmes, Lord Hastings Case by Ngamoko Nikora. Copyright Ngamoko Nikora. No part of this production shall be reproduced without permission of the author.